right, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. To Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industry. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We are joined today by a returning guest. I have not talked with him in face to face in 10 years. It's been 10 years since C2E2 2010, which was my very first convention. He is known for the comic Multiplex 10. He is known for the animation of Multiplex. He's also an avid D&D'er, which I have no knowledge of, but I definitely will be picking his brain on. We are joined today by the ever-talented Gordon McAlpin. How are you doing today, Gordon?
Great. How are you? It's been a long time. Yeah,
it truly has, man. It truly has. Like, as we were just talking before the show, and I'm like, man, it's I can't believe it's been 10 years since we've seen each other face to face. But I've been following your work for a long time. I've loved Multiplex 10. That's how we got introduced to each other. Our passion for
technically. Multiplex is the comic strip. Multiplex 10 is the web series. Little title change. I know it's dumb, but for a couple of reasons, I wanted to change the name. Is one, some guy has multiplex.com and I've never been able to get it. Some guy. And so one, I could get the URL for Multiplex 10. But also it kind of separates them because Multiplex 10 is a little sillier, a little goofier, and it's more episodic. Self-contained, I guess. There's not really much continuity to it. The animated short comes first. Everything else could be in any order, pretty much. I don't know. It was starting to creep up that there were a few things that kind of led into other things. But anyway, we can talk about that later.
So since we last spoke, Multiplex has since ended. But it was well received. There was a great following for it, a passionate fan base. You had I believe it was a Kickstarter as well for the books, as well as the animation.
One for each of them. And there was a Kickstarter, 3 Kickstarters for books, and one Kickstarter for the animated short, as well as a small Indiegogo to get some distribution funds like film festivals, submission fees, and stuff like that, which did end up getting us like a dozen, probably. Awesome. Nominations or recognitions, not necessarily wins, but laurels and stuff. I had a lot of laurels from the web series, and the animated short. And then there was one more Kickstarter for the web series proper, which we funded kind of partly by 2 Indiegogos. It's a long story. Anyway, yes,
a lot of crowdfunding.
5 Kickstarters and 2 Indiegogos and a Patreon. Yes, a lot of crowdfunding. Yeah, it's all like I stopped running ads on Multiplex a few years before it ended because I got fed up with ads on the internet. They ruin it. They make it suck. And so I was like, that's when Patreon first started, and I've been using Patreon and crowdfunding ever since. I mean, I'd already done a little bit of crowdfunding, but by that point. But when Patreon started, I don't put ads on anything anymore. The people who don't know who I am and aren't my Patreon backers, sticking an ad in front of their face isn't going to make them like my work more. So whatever.
Does anyone really say, wow, I really came to it because I really love that ad?
But what does happen is if you have a website and you're trying to dig through the archive, these ads just keep getting in my face. Like, yeah, I'm going to stop reading or stop watching or whatever. It's the same with the movie news websites. I went to one and I had to click like 4 things to be able to read the ad or the actual article because there were 3 pop-ups and these intermediate ones that are in the body of the text and constantly loading while you're trying to read. So it's moving the text. It's just like, it's infuriating.
If you have an ad blocker on your browser, it's just like, hey, by the way, if you want to read this article, you should really disable it. So I'm like, I really don't. I'm going to find something else. In fact, screw you. I'm going to go to YouTube.
I really don't like using ad blockers, but I do on a few sites because they're overzealous.
I get it. It's a commercial model and all that jazz. And it was great. It was great back in the day in the early 2000s. I'm sure it'd be great, generate wonderful revenue, etc. But until then, it's up until now, it's been like, okay, I'm already inundated. My attention span is waning as I get older. I really don't care about this stuff.
Yeah. My attention span has definitely gotten shorter in my old age. I've been watching more TV shows than movies.
Yeah.
12 years doing multiplex, and now I'm mostly watching TV shows. I'm like, did I get dumber? I think so. I think I got dumber in the last 15 years. Over the last 15 years, whatever. Yeah.
What's even worse is it's kind of hilarious you bring that up, because I've been watching a lot of Amazon Prime, and great content, great shows. But some cases, if
I'm watching Bosch right now.
Which one?
Bosch is a good show.
I haven't seen that one yet.
I like it. Titus Welliver's good. It's got a great cast, and some of them are alums from The Wire, all grown up. A couple of them anyway. And it's a great cast. The writing's pretty good. The cast makes it better. Sometimes the writing's a little cornball. But they're very serious delivering this cornball dialogue. You buy it a little more easily than shows where they're like, oh, this stuff doesn't make any sense.
It's when the writers are actually drunk on stuff, during the things like, all right, we got these 5 characters. We got to do a loop them in somehow. Yeah. Who brought the tequila? Okay, let's go. After 12 years of doing Multiplex itself, I mean, was it a relief to finally say, you know what, I finally closed this chapter in my life, and I can move on to do other things. It just happens to be now an animated version of it.
Yeah, it was a huge relief. Honestly, I still loved it, of course, at the end. But once the eyes were on the prize, once I was like 2 years away from it ending, I was really starting to to want to be farther along. But I would not let myself, speed it up artificially just to be done with it. I wanted to stick the landing. I wanted to nail it. I wanted to give all of the characters, one last little hurrah, which is sort of my alternative to, and this is where they end up. It was kind of like just implying that, they're going along the trajectory that you see from when they were, regular cast members to when Calvin and Sonny were living together or whatever, dating at the end of the series. Just you're like, okay, somewhere in that direction, without necessarily spelling it all out, because I don't like when writers do that. I kind of like leaving it up to my imagination, the reader's imagination. So
like the Coen brothers, basically.
I guess, yeah. To me, the story has an ending for a reason. If there's anything after that about Jason and Kurt, it's not Multiplex. But yeah, Multiplex was it was about the movie theater as much as it was about Jason and Kurt. So, if you take them out of that movie theater, although technically I guess they're still at the movie theater, but if you take them out of the movie theater, it's not Multiplex anymore.
Rosebud and like Soylent Green and all that other stuff, they never left. They're always there. It's like the Twilight Zone, basically, of movie theaters.
Well, I mean, that's more like the web series version, the animated version. It kind of might be. It's hard to explain, but like there is a more genre friendly take to Multiplex 10, I think. Like Multiplex, the comic was very grounded. Aside from an evil coffee machine, it didn't grow like arms or legs or anything, but it was an evil coffee machine. And I guess the difference is in Multiplex 10, it would grow arms and legs. So, it's like if you remember the zombie movie storyline in Multiplex, where the characters film the movie, and in the movie, Michael Bay was the devil, like literally the devil. That kind of thing could happen in Multiplex 10. And it's, the web series itself, we only had a little bit, like we had a talking movie projector and a bear working in a movie theater. They're little sort of nods in that direction, because When you're doing a 1.5-minute thing of Kurt and Jason talking about something, there's not a lot of room for a whole bunch of other goofy stuff. If you start getting into plot and plot-driven short stories, then yeah, if I had hypothetically speaking, if I had a 15-minute animated series of Multiplex 10, there would be like the zombie episode, the slasher killer episode, etc. The rom-com episode, maybe. It's a different format, and the web series only kind of scratches the surface of that. But yeah, it's going to get goofier if I get to keep doing it in some other form.
Well, let's talk about the animation stuff now. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. You did everything for Multiplex 10, the animation and all of that other stuff.
I wouldn't say everything. I had co-writers on the vast majority of it. Dana Lurie Shaw co-wrote the animated short. Joe Dunn has co-written or solely written the majority of the series. Tom's written one or I think Tom just wrote the first one, actually. The first web series, the mini episode, the Oscar pool one. Yeah, and a couple of them I've gotten. The way it works is I'm kind of the showrunner. So like I have more of an editorial control over it. I nix jokes that don't feel like Multiplex to me and stuff like that. But like I think Joe is basically the head writer. I'm too busy like animating stuff, to like write the next episode while I'm busy drawing pictures. So that's kind of one reason why it just ended up that Joe started doing that. But he's also really funny. These really self-contained jokes. And one of the things that I really wanted to do in the animated series is push Kurt more to the front than he was in the very Jason-centric comic. I wanted it to be much more of Kurt and Jason, not just the Jason show. And there like Jason, when we start getting to the longer episodes, Jason will have little more to do, but Kurt is the active character. Jason is the curmudgeon that just kind of watches shit around him happen, So it makes more sense that in the animated version, Kurt is at least on equal billing with Jason. So that's why there's been some more Jason-free episodes than Kurt-free.
But it's not a bad thing to spread out the characters as you have them, because you do have a lot of characters for the show.
I still wish we could have had more episodes with just focusing on Melissa and Becky, but but yeah, it should be more of an ensemble cast. The comic was very much an ensemble cast with Jason also hogging the spotlight too much because he was the easiest one to write. I don't know why that would be.
It escapes me there, and I was only reading it for 12 years.
I just but he was the easiest one to write. So, and then once you start some of these storylines, you're like, I can't just stop that one. I can't just drop. I dropped a lot of storylines early on because stuff would just force it out. Like a new movie would come out that I had to make a joke about, and then a whole plot line would get dropped. That's the curse of webcomics. You're not planning this shit out. And I was like, oh, that's good. That's funnier. I got to do that. Sorry, subplot with Angie and her fiance.
Yeah, we didn't care about them anyhow.
I did. I liked Angie. I liked Angie. Duncan was a douchebag. He was supposed to be.
And that was not from personal experience whatsoever.
That one, no, I wouldn't say. Duncan and Angie, I mean, maybe generic asshole boyfriend, sure. That's from experience. But yeah, Duncan was definitely not off of any specific person.
When it comes to movies, especially when it comes to the amount of movies you cover in the entire series, it's like an archive, a history of either really good movies or really shitty movies, mostly starring Michael Bay.
One interesting thing when I have gone back and reread something, like in the process of trying to find some background that I want to ransack for Multiplex 10 or whatever, the weirdest ones to me are the ones that, like, I mentioned movie news, but the movie never ended up getting made. And I've like Trey Parker and Matt Stone were gonna make a kaiju movie? What? Like, they had signed on to do a movie, I think, called Giant Monster Attacks Japan. And they were gonna do the whole thing with the suit, because they just made Team America with miniature, marionettes, and then they wanted to do something big. They signed on for that, and it did not go anywhere. And so when I read the strip about that, I was like, that doesn't make any sense anymore. So I kind of noticed that while I was still doing the strip a little bit, and I made a point to not write about the really obscure stuff that probably won't happen. It wasn't, I kind of only talked about stuff if they got a trailer or something, or if they were like a really big movie that was definitely going to get made.
Kind of be funny if you had an Easter egg and get Trey Parker or Matt Stone just to kind of come in for a quick, like, 2-second thing, like 1 ticket to Godzilla, please, or something like that.
You know, I should ask them about that. I'm an animator too now.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I'm just going to go up to the biggest stars I possibly know, and I'm just going to ask them, how do you think I got most of my interviews?
I think I did send them a copy of the Multiplex 10 animated short when it came out, and I never heard anything.
I'm sure it's on their list of things to watch.
Probably never got past the spam filters. So, like some weird person's emailing a computer file. Yeah, delete.
That's not a virus whatsoever. This is something I've never done before, and I don't know if I can consider myself a geek. And the reason why I say this is because I have never done any D&D whatsoever in my life. So what is D&D, and how did you first get involved with it?
This is a longer story than it should be. Anything out of my mouth turns into a longer story than it should be. So I actually played D&D a little bit when I was a kid. My brother was kind of the driver in this. I was in maybe 4th grade or something like that. And so that would have been about 83, 84, something. And so it was like the red box with the knight swinging a sword at a dragon, height of maybe not the height, but the satanic panic was still going on, definitely around D&D. But my brother got it, and he wanted to DM, and I was like, I'll play. And so I played like 4 characters at the same time because, I was a kid and we didn't know anybody else who played D&D. But we played a bit when we were, in grade school for a few years, and I got older. I still read some of the novels. Like, I loved the Dragonlance novels and Forgotten Realms, but I kind of stopped playing by like mid to late high school, I think, probably even earlier than that. But I still read fantasy novels, and so D&D was always on my radar pop culturally. Not to mention the fact that I read comic books, so it's hard to avoid. In terms of the cultural presence of it, it's like being a Star Wars fan but not watching the new movies. It's possible. But D&D was on my radar. Years and years passed. When I moved to the Twin Cities while I was getting my MFA in interactive design, which turns out games are a form of interactive, entertainment. So interactive design actually covered, we had like a game design. So yeah, I started kind of getting interested in playing games again. I played some video games, here and there throughout my adult life, but mostly things like Civilization or XCOM or whatever. But it was kind of a 1-2 punch, actually. My game design professor, who's also my advisor, she had me do a research assistantship where I played a whole bunch of video games and like tracked like the different ways they convey information through symbols. Like not just iconographic symbols, but also like in universe symbols, like the use of white paint, for instance, to indicate something that you could climb on in Tomb Raider, things like that. Different kinds of symbols, different kinds of information that they're conveying, different patterns of behavior, etc. And so between that and just taking the class itself, I got this itch to play D&D again, and the rest, like the rest is history. My life was ruined. I played a short-lived campaign in the Twin Cities. It sort of fell apart a little bit. When I moved here, a guy I knew through having read Multiplex was like, "Hey, I heard you say you wanted to play D&D. I play D&D with some friends of mine." And what's funny is 2 years later, I think I'm still playing with them, and he actually had to bow out of the campaign. But they're great people. They're great to play with. I've played with a few guest appearances on D&D podcasts or things like that. But and I recently started playing a second campaign because the pandemic, and if I'm playing D&D, I'm not worrying about the state of the world. So like a year ago, I'd been playing D&D for a while. I noticed that there is a website called the DM's Guild, where people are allowed to basically license some specific D&D properties and make their own adventures for it. So anybody can publish or technically it's publishing because they claim that the DM's Guild website is the publisher of record. Okay. But these are independent creators, and so it's like saying YouTube published everything that's on YouTube. It's like sure,
gray
I guess
area
some technical legal sense they're the publisher, but the individual creators on the show can write and illustrate and design their own ebooks using D&D, and so they're using the official D&D rules, and they could even set them in the Forgotten Realms and stuff like that. Like, I'm trying to oversimplify so I don't get too technical about the ins and outs of 5th edition role-playing game supplement publishing. Yeah. So I started, I'm a graphic designer and illustrator and animator, like freelance for my day job, and that's what I've been doing all alongside Multiplex and Multiplex 10. That's the day job. I noticed like there's these these game designers, some of them needed a little help in the graphic design department, and so I started trying to building up a little portfolio of some samples of RPG book design work, and started picking up freelance work doing that. I've been doing a bunch of books with a producer there, Anthony Joyce, and a couple of them have been solely illustrated by me as well. So nice. That's always fun. And then from designing a whole series of those books, I kind of got the itch to write one myself. I DM'd a little bit, but mostly I come to it as a player and as somebody who studied a little bit of interactive design and feels like, hey, I could come up with some neat ideas for designing scenarios where the players have something interesting to do or a moral quandary or whatever. So I've got this itch to write my own adventure, and I ended up. I have not written that one yet. But it turned into a bigger idea than I wanted to tackle straight out of the gate. The first comic book you do is a 1,000-page graphic novel, you're not going to finish it. So you want to start small, and that's why Multiplex started as a comic strip, like gag strips, and then eventually grew into the big giant 12-year monstrosity that it turned into. So I wanted to do something smaller, like a one-shot. These are short adventures that are supposed to be played in like 3-4 hours, one sitting. Those are usually like 16, maybe 20 pages. So Death by Goblins, the adventure that I finished, is actually 70 pages. And it's about a 6 to 12 hour adventure.
Oh, only 6 to 12 hours.
That was my attempt to do a short adventure. I just keep wanting to add more stuff into it that fit in the theme, and so I hope to do shorter books at some point too. But yeah, so that's kind of like where I came to making D&D books.
So how important was it for you to place this adventure, the Goblins, Death by Goblins rather, on the Sword Coast, or tie it into the Lost Mine of Pandelver?
Not super. There were definitely bits of lore that are very much tied into Volo's Guide to Monsters and how goblins are described there. So like the book is using Forgotten Realms IP like intimately. There's stat blocks for goblin lashers and goblin booyah casters that weren't in Volo's Guide to Monsters. It kind of part of what I was interested in doing with the goblins was kind of building out what I felt was missing from Volo's Guide to Monsters. So there's some extra stat blocks and a little bit of lore and a couple of fun additions, like the Goblin Torch, who sets himself on fire and then jumps at you, or gets launched at you with a catapult.
Sounds like Magic the
Gathering. Well, exactly. That was inspired by Magic the Gathering, Gremlins also, and to some extent Aliens, because it can also turn like really dark and like the entire party could get killed. I try to make it a little fun, a little lighter, so it's sort of somewhat non-lethal if the DM wants to play it that way. But yeah, so as far as the physical location, it doesn't really matter at all that it's tied into the Sword Coast or the Lost Mines of Phandelver. Really, the only connection there is the fact that the first chapter, where you meet the surprise big bad at the end. This is one of the reasons why I'm having a hard time trying to talk about this, because
don't spoil it. Yeah.
There's a central joke. I mean, I have to here, but basically you meet a mysterious figure, you piss them off, and then they send goblins to kill you. That's the sole amount of plot in this. And then you kill him. When you meet him randomly, semi-randomly, depending on which adventure seed you used, or hook you used, rather. I always get those terms mixed up. Hook. Depending on which adventure hook you use, the big bad is in Stonehill Inn. That's what it's called. I forgot. The Stonehill Inn in Phandalin, which is the city. It's the starter town. It's where Lost Mines is set. It's where the adventures from the other one, the Essentials kit, Dragons of Icespire Peak, I think. Those are both kind of set around that same city. And because this first chapter can take place any amount of time, really, before the point where the goblins kidnap the characters and teleport them into their lair, and then they're trying to find a way out of the lair. That first part could literally be played when they're first level characters. So I kind of wrote this around the idea that, yes, you could play it in one sitting, but or like straight through 4 sittings in a row, but you could also integrate it into an existing campaign where you run into this weird guy when you're first level characters, and then you don't really hear from him again. And you kind of go along your lives. A couple of months later, while you're playing with your friends, you're level 2, level 3, and some weird stuff starts to happen. And you can kind of tease this person who's been like watching you, and oddly, you seem to be running into a lot of goblins, maybe. I don't know. And so the idea is that you could tease it as early as first level and kind of like foreshadow it in order to give yourself this big fight at level 6, where like the characters have like gotten a lot more powerful. Level 6 characters get all kinds of new cool abilities, so they can like really start mowing down tiny creatures like goblins. Like a fighter could take down 2 or 3 in a turn, and it's not like without even breaking a sweat at 6th level. So the idea is that you're just plowing through these guys, maybe, or hiding from them. But yeah, so yeah, the Phandalin connection is really just to make it easier to integrate into other campaigns. I think I read somewhere once that like Lost Mines of Phandelver was the first adventure played by like half of active D&D players. Maybe that skews younger, because older people who played older editions are like, I don't know. I think it was free somewhere too. So yeah, it's very widely played. I figured just cutting down the barrier of integrating the adventure into it would make things easier. You could very easily transpose that first chapter into any other location, and really, because the goblins teleport you to their actual lair, that could be anywhere. So, if you wanted to do this in Eberron, you just put the tavern that you meet him in any other city, and he's teleporting them anyway. So yeah, really long answer. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm used to these by now.
Okay.
I've been doing this for 12 years, so
Congratulations.
12 years on August 8th, 2008 is when I started.
Right on.
So.
Right on.
You have some unique magic items in the adventure: Cloak of Dramatic Effect, Loot of Charming. Do you create a magic item to fit a need for your adventure, or have ideas for magic items first and put them in the adventure thinking they'll be a good fit?
So most of the adventures, or most of the magic items in there, are from official books, other books. There's a few new ones that are new, but most of them are pretty minor. Like there's a potion of disguise, which is basically you drink a potion, you look like somebody else, and it's basically taking an existing spell, disguise self, and making it in potion form. And the reason I did that was because I wanted the character to use it on his bodyguards, his goblin bodyguards, and make them look like gnomes to hide the fact that he's connected to the goblins. So that's the sole reason. Although it did occur to me that if I left a couple of potions of disguise around their lair, later the players could drink them and look like goblins to sneak around a little easier. So they some of these things kind of just come in because I'm like, I just need something. Some of them are just me trying to kind of, I don't know, make it a little cooler in terms of visuals. I mean, this isn't a super serious adventure, so it seemed weird to me that the enchanter character in it would use. There's already a magic item called the Staff of Charming, I think, and he starts off playing a lute in the first chapter, and I figured I could bring that back. And you can't use a staff and a lute at the same time, so I was like, well, why don't I just make the lute a magic a lute of charming instead of a staff of charming. And then I modified it further to kind of really specialize what that character does. For instance, there's the fact that he needs to use his hands usually gets in the way of casting a spell, but I added a trait that let him do that, which is so the mechanics kind of suggest themselves, like, what do I need him to be able to do in order to preserve this visual without, by visual, I mean, the experience of that, seeing an enchanter that has this thing, because, in the final battle, for instance, he could be, nearby singing and casting spells while playing his lute. And that just seems a lot different than if somebody's like cackling maniacally at you, it's just it's a little less serious, a little funnier, I think, of a visual. And then the Cloak of Dramatic Effect, that came out of the idea that, like, if he's revealing his identity to the character, he's just like, it's me, the guy that you don't remember from from 5 years ago. I want to hide the fact that he's that guy. I don't have any clues to give that away, like having a big lute with him. And so I was like, well, they don't see his lute. He just pulls it out of his cloak, which was kind of a funny visual. So I was like, well, let's go with that. So literally the cloak is just a small bag of holding. So like he just slides it behind his back and it disappears into a pocket dimension, and he also had a ring of protection. So I just figured, I get rid of the ring of protection and build it into the cloak. So again, that's just like half a bag of holding and a ring of protection smushed together. And the reason it's a cloak is because it looks funny. So that's like, I'm sure there are much better ways to come up with ideas for new magic items, but that's how those two came from.
And all you need is have a mask and a tuxedo, like the tuxedo hat from Sailor Moon, and away you go. It was me all along. Whoosh.
Yeah, that's the other thing is like the reason I didn't just say he does this for fun, and I actually went a little bit further and made the magic item is because I wanted to, give other people the idea that they could do this with their characters, steal this item. If it's on the guild, anybody else in the guild can use it. That's part of the website's like usage agreement. So, not the pictures, but the text, they can use the Cloak of Dramatic Effect. And if they like it and they do that, awesome. I'm glad. It's a really interesting community because you could kind of just toss these ideas out and other people will be like, I think I could do that better. And so they do, or they don't. It becomes like this little melting pot of ideas, I think. And the good ones tend to rise to the top. So we'll see. And that's me throwing a couple of things in, see if they stick. Who knows?
All you need is a squirrel of holding now, and they can only hold 1 or 2 items at most.
Well, I don't know, because squirrels can really fit a lot in their pouches. I saw, maybe it wasn't a squirrel. Mm-hmm. It might have been some other mammal that has like pouches like that, and like they can just fill it all the way back. It's weird. But yeah, they could fit a lot of acorns in there. I don't know. I think you could easily argue that they could fit 100 pounds.
And they work for peanuts as well. So.
Yes, they prefer acorns though. So
well, they're nuts either way. So. Puns aside,
yeah.
So DM Guilds is doing a sale soon where they won't take any royalties and give all profits to the creator.
Technically, it's not a sale. I mean, it's a promotion for sure. Okay, but because I think what it is they're waiving their half of the royalties. When you make a sale, half the sale price goes to DM's Guild. Which they split among like affiliate links and themselves, of course, and Wizards of the Coast, who owns D&D. And then the other half goes to the creators. So yeah, what they're doing is they're forgoing their half. So hypothetically speaking, this is the distinction. The prices for the items could be exactly the same. I think what you're going to see a lot of, though, is a lot of people lowering their price to basically 50% off, or even just a little bit less, because if they do 25% off and make a sale, they're actually still making 25%. Somewhere in there, they're making more money from selling it at a lower price than they would normally. I think it's called Play It Forward. I think we could sit out for 3 weeks or two or 3 weeks getting royalties to help out the people that, contribute these awesome books to the ecosystem of D&D. Like they're not officially published, but they are licensed, and a lot of people really enjoy them and use them. And so it's part of the thing that keeps people interested and active in D&D. So yeah, they're kind of giving back a little bit, and I think that's pretty awesome.
When it comes to D&D podcasts or D&D YouTube channels or whatever, is there any that you either have been on or you recommend, or something that you'll always watch? It's like one of those first things you do if you have time.
I don't watch a lot. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I did listen to the first Adventure Zone arc, and I mean the entire arc with Taco and Magnus and whatnot through to the end, not just the first storyline too. And it was wonderful. It was also very long. So I did not continue with the show post the original Adventure Zone characters, and I never got into Critical Role or anything like that. So I feel a little bad, but yeah, if I'm going to listen to 3 hours of people playing D&D, I want to be playing D&D. I know a lot of people love them, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not something I'm currently doing.
But what ones have you been on?
Demon Days with a Z. I think actually that is the only one that I've been on. There's another one though. My second group is DM'd by Steven. I can't remember his last name. He does a actual play podcast.
We're kind of reaching the end of this here. Is there anything I haven't brought up that you would like to share or talk about here?
I don't know. Let's see. We talked about Multiplex 10. We talked about Death by Goblins, which I'm super proud of. I guess, it's worth mentioning that 2 of the best-selling books on the store right now are also books that I designed but didn't write or illustrate. Elminster's Candlekeep Companion, written by a host of amazing people: Anthony Joyce, Justice Armin, Ed Greenwood, creator, the creator of the Forgotten Realms, and of Jeremy Forbing, a bunch of other people. And then also a book called The Border Kingdoms, which is by Alex Kammer and Ed Greenwood again. So those 2 books are at the top of the DM's Guild sales charts. They're pretty awesome books, and I'm proud to have designed them. but yeah, as far as stuff that I write and draw, I guess the most recent thing that I drew, other than Death by Goblins, was there was an adventure called The Blood Hunter, which is kind of a one-on-one D&D experience, 1 DM, 1 player, and it's based off of Matt Mercer, Critical Role creator Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter class, and I designed and illustrated the entire book. I'm actually finding that I really enjoy doing these self-contained books that I get to do all of the illustrations for, like Death by Goblins, although hopefully smaller than 70 pages, and Blood Hunter.
For sure, definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was Weekend at Strahd's. That was a little weird though. So whatever.
Yeah, nice take on Weekend at Bernie's.
That's yep. it's a parody. Yeah. So but I guess that's it for me, creatively speaking.
Everyone has one person that kind of inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
That I don't think there's any one person. There's too many people. God, no. I would, well, I'll just say one person. I don't want to give the impression that he's my idol or this deeply close mentor to me, but the writer cartoonist Xander Cannon, he started off doing the Chainsaw Vigilante for New England Comics, and then did the Replacement God, a bunch of nonfiction stuff, and currently he's doing a book called Kaiju Max, which is phenomenal. I was basically a fan of his since I was 21 maybe, and we just so happened to live in the Twin Cities for a little bit, 5 years while I was in grad school, and we got to know each other slightly. I wouldn't, I'd call him a friend. He'd probably be like, yeah, he's a nice guy. But he's a great guy. He's always been very generous with his time. He does the same thing for dozens of other cartoonists all the time. And he's a very giving person. And his work is phenomenal. I kind of identified with it when I was younger on some level, because he's, you know, one guy doing his own kind of weird thing that wasn't really mainstream comics popular. And, you know, he's clearly had a greater degree of success than I have. But he did start from doing, you know, Chainsaw Vigilante and you know, a short-lived self-published book that did make it to Image for a little bit, Replacement God. So, you know, but yeah, he's always been an indie guy at heart. He's publishing with Oni now and getting phenomenal, you know, acclaim for books like Heck and Kaiju Max. But yeah, so like I always kind of wanted that trajectory for my own career, not necessarily solely in comics, obviously, because otherwise I would still be doing comics right now. But you know, doing indie level work and getting to the point where I can, you know, keep doing that work and not have to, you know, constantly be doing commercial jobs on the side and stuff like that. You know, so I mean, I know he does a lot of commercial jobs on the side too, but you know, he's able to produce these projects that are, you know, brilliant and you know, also be a very nice person.
Transitioning then, obviously it's a great segue into your professional career. You have done amazing work for the past almost 20 years now when it comes to illustration and art and writing, etc. You know, you've become successful in that regard. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
Personally successful? I mean, you know, I have a decent life. Sure, I love my wife. We live in a good, nice neighborhood. Boston's freaking expensive. You know, do I wish that you know, Multiplex had gotten popular enough that I could have justified doing a fourth book? Yes. You know, do I wish I didn't have to constantly scrape very, very tiny budgets together to do, you know, the web series episodes that we've done? Yes. But at the same time, you know, we've won some awards for what we have done. I'm really proud of what we've done. I think they're extremely funny, certainly for the scale. I think they look way better than, you know, their budgets would suggest. You know, it's so, yeah, I'm incredibly proud of the work that I've done. So I feel, you know, successful in that regard. I don't feel like I'm phoning it in. Or struggling to find a decent sized audience. It's just not enough to be commercially successful and really like, you know, if I wasn't, you know, if I didn't have any other job, I could turn out a Multiplex 10 episode every month, easy. But other work is important. So it always slows things down when I have to start, you know, paying the bills, and then I sometimes get a little demoralized. But you know, yeah, I can't really complain without, you know, pulling out a tiny, if not world's smallest violin. So
do you attribute money to personal success though?
Only in the sense that having a budget determines how, like, what you can do with it in terms of funding the next project. Like I would love nothing more than to do 11-minute episodes of Multiplex 10, you know, that other people would have to animate in order to get out on a reasonable pace. But you know, we're not there at this point. We'd need corporate money or a huge explosion of new you know, viewership on YouTube. But you know, we're lucky to get 2,000 views, which is nothing at all to sneeze at. But you also make zero ad revenue from it. So, and I don't run ads on my website. So the crowdfunding, you know, is like, you know, I think my Patreons are like 300, 400 a month. If it's not, well, yeah, I know. And see, this is exactly why I don't want to complain. Like, yeah, I'm churning out stuff to Patreon on a regular basis. Maybe I wish I could do more, but you know, nobody wants to see my railroad safety videos on Patreon. The stuff you do to pay the bills is maybe a little less flashy, but at least sometimes you get something technical out of it, But yeah, so that's exactly why I don't like to complain about my lot in life. I am still a designer professionally. It would be nice to focus more on my projects. I'd like to pay Joe better. But yeah.
Especially with this promotion to head writer and all that stuff too. So
he is the first person to try to diminish his role in this, and I'm like, he's like, yeah, but you throw away half the stuff I toss out. I'm like, well, yeah, but like the rest of it's good, and like 80% of the script, it's that, some of it's I don't know. He underestimates his importance to the screenwriting process of the web series.
The reverse of obviously being personally successful is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
Well, I don't really have very many. I just have no. I honestly, I would be hard pressed to call anything about my career a failure. Multiplex was not some questionable content sized hit, but I'm really proud of it, and there are a lot of people who really liked it, and the same thing goes for even Death by Goblins, say. If you compared its first week of sales to a Multiplex book, it's vastly smaller, but it's also a much smaller audience and target and whatever. So it's hard to know how to compare that, but and I'm actually pretty happy with the sales, but of course they could always be better. Considering I have the top two, I designed the top two sellers on the Guild. I kind of know what the best sellers are selling at, and I'm like, well, I'm number 75 in the top 100. It's still pretty good. Yeah. So I would say that my failures are more small successes. So they could be bigger, but I'm not going to complain about the fact that they're not bigger.
The younger generation are looking at Multiplex 10. They're looking at your Death by Goblins, and they're becoming inspired to do what they want to do. Maybe they follow your path, maybe they follow something different. But how can they inspire the generation that follows them?
Honestly, I think the best way to do it is to not see other creators as competition. Because they're not. Nobody looks at my work and then Joe Schmo next to me and goes, well, they're both really good, but I'm just gonna buy that one. If they're both actually really good, they'll buy both of them eventually. I know there's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of web comics out there, but somebody else's success does not take anything from you. So be supportive, promote your fellow creators, genuinely, the ones whose work you like, or the ones that you just think are nice people. Promote their work as hard or harder than you do your own. And what comes around goes around. And I'm not a big believer in karma in any literal sense, but if you talk well of other people when they deserve it, and and you're supportive of other people's work, hopefully somebody else will do that with you, and it just kind of lifts up the community as a whole.
So is there any social media presence that you have, or any websites that we should be looking at when it comes to yourself or all of your work?
I'm probably most active on Twitter, GMCALPIN, G McAlpin, at Twitter. My portfolio website, where you could see a whole bunch of the books that I've worked on, is at gordonmcalpin.com. For Multiplex 10, the web series, multiplex10.com. It's on YouTube as well, but you could get there from the Multiplex website. So it's easy to just share that one.
That ends this episode of Two Geeks Talking, where, of course, you can find this interview and thousands of others at tgtmedia.com, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/tgtmedia. You can find me on social media at Kurt Sasso. It's with the letter K, not the letter C. If it's the letter C, you've been doing it wrong the entire time, and I don't know who that person is. That being said, we're going to tune in next week for another great interview. We're going to have Lauren Urban on, who is the D&D community manager and also a DM for Dungeon Drunks.
Cool.
Will be on the show. A longtime friend from back in the RVB days, as well as Rooster Teeth, and just an incredible oboist as well.
Oh, wow. Cool.
She's wonderful, truly. But anyhow, thanks again for listening and watching. Tune in, like I said, next week for another great person on the show where creative people come to talk about themselves, because I like it.
All right.
Thanks all.